So I've talked in the past about this concept that I utilize with my son. Pretty basic. The whole idea of just always knowing why. Concept pretty much just being anything you believe, anything you do, um, any opinions you hold. You should always know why. You should just always know why. Why'd you do it? Why do you believe that? You should always be able to explain that. And I think about that a lot, right? Naturally, as I form opinions, as I take actions, I think about, why am I doing that? Um, and I've started using that simple question, simple framework, talking to people about the coronavirus situation. And it's a relatively simple thing. I've been asking kind of a sampling of people of, you know, I guess I typically start the questioning by saying, what information do you need to receive, um, assuming they're locked down and they're sticking to the kind of social distancing and stay at home orders and all that as we have here in New York. What's the information you'd need to receive to change that? To say, okay, now I feel comfortable going to a family gathering or going to a movie or whatever the thing is. And what's shocking to me is maybe not shocking, but disappointing to me is the lack of the ability to answer that question. And ultimately, the question behind the question is, why are you following it now? And what I realize is, and it's probably not, it's probably relatively commonsensical, is often the reaction comes from a place of people thinking that I'm questioning their conclusion. In that I not even that I'm questioning it, because I am questioning it, that I'm challenging it, that I'm saying it's wrong, right? That you're doing the wrong thing. If you're locked down, you should be going out. If you're not locked down, you should be locked down. And it's much like I talk about with my son and the whole parent dynamic, where most parents don't want to give their children the opportunity to ask why because they may not know the answer, or they may not be certain that their answer is right, or that they've thought through it enough, so it's easier not to have to answer that question. It seems to be the same thing in this scenario. Why is it that you're locked down right now, or just the converse of that question being, what would allow you to feel comfortable going out, right? Which to identify that, you need to understand what's stopping you from going out right now. And there has not been a lot of good answers. Now, obviously, it's a small sample and all those things, but even just focusing on the group of people that I've spoken to, it makes me wonder what's the plan, what's the path, right? If you're taking this action right now, and you don't know why, how will you know when it's time to end it? How will you know when you should go back to work or go back to the gym or go back to family gatherings? Um, what's the thought process on that? And what it usually comes down to, although people are very uncomfortable saying this, but there's really not much of an alternative, is, well, when they tell me I can, which I guess isn't the worst answer in the world. It is a reason, or it is an explanation. And assuming the they is kind of, the government and, the professionals and the healthcare experts, most likely, right? Medical, scientific experts, etc. And obviously, there's something to be said for listening to experts. But I don't think that advice goes to the point of blindly listen to experts and just whatever they tell you, you do, right? You should take that in as an input, a heavily weighted input, right? Much higher than just some random video you watch on YouTube or whatever it might be. But it's an input where ultimately you still have to do your cost benefit calculation. You still have to come to your determination of what action am I taking and why? What view, conclusion, opinion do I hold on this topic and why? And you might say, well, I've heard experts say X, Y, and Z, and I trust them based on these credentials and their track record and, having heard them speak and different things. And that's why. And that's a great answer. That's a fantastic answer. But that's not what's being said. And what's concerning about that, again, isn't that I'm suggesting that people are wrong, because I don't know. Nobody really does. Should we be locked down like this for this long? Maybe. It's certainly a terrible situation on all sides, but maybe it's necessary. Should we be opening up the economy? Maybe. I don't know. But you should know why you feel what you feel. You should have a sense of what's driving that determination, because otherwise you're just being led along towards something. And again, the immediate reaction to that is often, well, you're trying to imply that I'm a sheep and that I'm just following the herd and I'm being misled. Well, the sheep part, maybe, depending on how you define that. Obviously, I know that's a little bit of a provocative term, but the part about being led is true. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you are being led. Something's leading you that's not rational thought and that's not kind of your objective view on the situation. And it's disappointing that that doesn't concern more people. That more people that I speak to aren't saying, "Yeah, I really should have some view on what this is." And I did a similar exercise maybe about a couple weeks ago, where I asked people a similar question, just different phrasing. What's the number of deaths? If somebody could promise you that from this day forward, there will be X amount of deaths, guaranteed, no doubt about it. If you open the economy back up, if we just go back to normal, right? Just remove all restrictions, everything goes away. What's the number in which you would say, okay, let's do it? It's almost impossible for people to answer that question. So what I would often do is I would go to an extreme. I would say, well, if it were two people, I assume you would say, open it back up. Yeah, of course, right? That's the response. Well, if it was 20 million people, I assume you would say no. Of course, yeah. Okay, so you have some calculation you're doing, right? You're not completely in the dark on this. You have some sense of it's more than two, it's less than 20 million. Now, there's a whole host of room in between there, but that's the point. That's the challenge. You have to get yourself to an understanding of why. What do I believe? Is it 1 million people? Is it 100,000 people? Is it 500,000 people? The number itself really doesn't matter as much as the why. How do you get to it? And people seem all too comfortable to just not know, and just do what they think they should be doing. And I'll hear things like, well, all the states are closed and all these countries are closed and the schools are closed and everything's closed. So that's telling me everything should be closed. But obviously, right, cliche, what if everybody's just doing that? Now, again, that's not to say that the medical professionals aren't doing their job and they don't mean well and they're not doing the right thing, but they are just people, right? They are just people. I'm not implying that they're wrong. I'm implying that they could be wrong. Just like people that are saying the impact on the economy and that for every, percent in GDP drop equals this many deaths, that's just people coming up with calculations. They could be wrong. There was a time in our history as a planet and as a human race where the smartest people in the world believed that the earth was flat. That's what they believed, the smartest people in the world. And the people that questioned it or thought differently for a period were thought as insane or worse. There's precedent. There's precedent for people being wrong, especially when it's something as complex as this. So again, my point isn't to say that whatever you believe right now, we should be quarantined, we shouldn't be, that it's wrong. My point is to say if you don't know why, that's a problem. And that should bother you until you can get to the point where you can explain why. And if you can't, if you can never get to that point, well, then what are you basing any of your decisions on? There's got to be some grounding in some logic or some rational thought that dictates what you're doing. And you should seek to find that.